Hi, Davi here, and today we have an episode in the art review series here on YouTube. And today we'll be checking out the work of Matumot, based in, looks like Japan, am I wrong? Anyway, oh yeah, I think it's Japanese, oh shit. So it's kind of similar to the work of the last artist we reviewed, Migo. Even though there's way more shading, way more, where it feels more 3D because there is more like coloring and shadows for Migo 1942 or Kiwu or Shiwu. For Matumot, the style is, first of all, let's just quickly sort of glance through it. There's hardly any shading, like you don't see shadows, and even if there is, it's usually in black, like pure black. And sometimes there are like legitimate shadows, but it's so, like, it doesn't seem obvious. It seems flat for the most part. So the color scheme is almost pastel, lots of pinks, blues, the pastel version anyway, where it's more light and it's kind of like baby sort of themed. Like it's just easier on the eyes and not as bright. Lots of focus on character design. I think lots of fan art here. I think this is Boki something? I do see this chick and this chick often here on Twitter. Oh shit, on X. Yeah, I do like the shapes used here. It's a bit gestural in that the shapes are not always like right. Sometimes it seems sort of abstract or kind of skewed sometimes, but the energy is there, which I do like. You know, your shapes don't always have to be accurate. You can sort of prioritize the feeling more than accuracy when it comes to using shapes. So I do think this isn't the first try. I think they'll do a rough sketch, kind of this one, kind of like these, and then they'll do the final ink. So let me just go back in the beginning. So basically that's the vibe. Lots of pastel colors, character art, female, anime obviously. And the shapes, I like it. It's strong. It's very graphical in nature, and the composition is pretty good. Like the framing of the characters, it's not always like a full body thing. Unlike Migo or the artist we reviewed recently, it's more about the design. I would say, or maybe some story of the character. But here it's more of the pose. I mean, yeah, there is some storytelling here and there, but it's more like it's a kind of artwork you would see in a poster, in a shirt, in a bag. Like it's perfect for like advertisements, I think, or branding. Like there's just something, or album covers. It's just more pop. It has a pop art vibe. So let me just zoom in. I do see some halftone used. That's pretty much the only noticeable texture. Everything else is done in flat colors, so there's no shading, no rendering. It's all essentially flat, and they do like to employ that halftone texture. Maybe they do this in KaizanBlu. It looks like it, or maybe Manga Studio, or something of that nature, or that kind of anyway. If you do look at the line work, let me just open image in new tab. Can we zoom in? Shit. The fuck? Sorry. There is some variety in line weight, but it's very subtle. And if you look at it, there's almost a space in between certain strokes when it comes to their line work. Like each line, sometimes it has a bleed in the end, but also when it continues to the next line, there's a space. So it's not one continuous line. And they don't intentionally, or they don't even try to like meet it. Like they sort of just let the flat colors define the edge. For example, there you can tell that this is a even without the flat colors, you can still sort of tell that this whole thing is a hand, because the spacing is so small anyway. But the point is, it's not one continuous line. And sometimes they do erase it a little bit, where the color takes over. So I think that contributes to that line variety. But that line variety is really just in the contours. There's no shading by a line, like like back and forth, sort of dashy strokes. None of that. And I do notice if you just go back here, the lines within the figure are the ones colored, but the lines outside are in black. So if you look at the lines of, say, the clavicles, the fingers, for the most part, the eyes, the color is very similar to the tone of the skin. So it's sort of reddish, pinkish. So but although the line weight is almost the same, the thickness, it is slightly thinner. But the thing that's separating it from the rest is the fact that it is in a different color. For example, here in the neck, right? Obviously in the cleavage area, in the pelvis. And if you look at the line work, the contours, it's very minimal. And it seems smooth. I don't see a lot of like super sharp. It's not jaggedy or harsh. There's more of like a fluid look to their artwork. And it's so minimal. Like the line work is very, like the whole thing actually is minimalistic. The line work, the way the colors are done, even the use of flats makes it look, or only flats makes it minimal. The texture is pretty much only the halftone texture. There's no shading, no rendering at all. No light source. Obvious light source anyway. I mean, maybe there's a bit of shadow here in black, right? Below the neck. But that's it. It's more of, it's very minimal. It's like 5%. These whole like black, pure black shapes, they're like 5% of the whole thing. Oh wait, look at the beak. It's colored, so it goes with the color of the actual beak. The line is sort of darker than the actual beak. Interesting. Okay, I think this chick has 2 wings, right? One has more. Are these feathers? They look like feathers to me. But the other one doesn't have one. Yeah, it's sort of like a conceptual thing where it doesn't always make sense. There's sort of it feels more freeing when you do this. I do like this part of the hand here. Let me just open image in new tab. I do like the variety of line weight here with the hand. And again, if you zoom in, there are these sorts of spacing in between the lines, where it's just about to meet the other one, but also each line tends to have like a bleed in the beginning of the stroke and in the end of the stroke. It reminds me of like G pens or high-tech pens. If you've ever used like those popular tech pens, they had the sort of vibe where you do see a slight bleed. Yeah. And it makes your work look a little more natural. Even if everything is flat, just that bleed makes it more diverse, more imperfect, but in a good way. Because if it was all like one line width, it can be a bit boring, right? If you have flat colors, but also your lines are also somewhat flat, it's like flat on flat. It's not like a bit of diversity or a bit of contrast, I think helps. So sure, even if the colors are somewhat pastel, plain, not as like super strong in the eyes, I think it's the line work that sort of pulls you in, right? But also it's the framing. I do like the way they frame their compositions. Again, it's very poster-like. It employs maybe a little bit of graphic design. Lots of like diagonal back and forth, like the leg goes up, the body goes here. So there's sort of a contrasting element there. Again, with the texture, half-tone texture. Very minimal lines. In this case, the lines within the sweater, they're not blue. Usually the outer ones would be black, and then the inner ones would be like the same or similar shade or color as the flat color. I mean, you will see it in the face and in the hands, like the inside lines are red. But again, if you look at the thickness, it's still where it's similar to the thickness of the lines everywhere else. So the most notable thing is the fact that it's not the same color, or the color is very similar to the flat color that's underneath that thing. So for example, the skin tone is somewhat pink red, so the lines are going to be even redder or more pink. I like it. It does have a sketchy vibe. I think it's because of first of all, the spacing thing. And I don't think that they're trying to make it tight, which I like. So even if you can clearly tell that I don't think this was done in the first try, I think anyway. Maybe there was an initial rough sketch. The point is it still has that raw sort of energetic feel you get from a sketch, but at the same time it's very presentable because it's clean. And it's sort of hard to find that balance of how do you keep that raw energy from, say, your initial sketch? Like, how do you keep that gesture, but at the same time make it presentable for everyone to actually like it and understand what you're trying to do? Now, in this case, obviously they are going for a more minimalistic approach. And even when they do shadows, they will add a line around that shadow. Very interesting approach. Right? There's no shading anywhere. Except for the black parts, I guess. Maybe in the sweater a little bit. Some slight indication of it. That's it's contoured by a light gray sort of line. But also the blacks like under the neck. Maybe even here. So the black under the neck, but also this halftone texture indicating the shadow under the neck, but also the hair in the back, right? Even in the hand. But look at how minimal it is. Yeah, the lines are not technically tight. Well, maybe they are, I'm not even sure. But it's just so fluid to me, and I like it. Anyway. So I'm trying to think, like, how can I apply this to my work? Because there's something about it that's just so attractive. I think this one would be my favorite piece. Because it has quite a few things going on in it. It's a bit more diverse. And you know, there are things that are noticeable, right? Oh yeah. But also, oh yeah, I think it's also because of the theme. It's somewhat playful. Like the story isn't that deep, but it's again, it's like pop art. Like it feels nice to be posted on, say, a wall, in a frame, right? Can we zoom in here? I'll zoom in. Holy shit. Right? Look at how they define the edge. You could have just left it as a flat, but they decided to use a line as well. And again, the lines don't always meet. They tend to have bleeds in the beginning and end of the stroke. Right? Look at the spacing. The interior lines you can see here in the clavicle, in the chest area, a bit of that rib cage. Zoom out, look at those shadows, in this case the blacks. The inside of the coat or jacket, the frills, the underside anyway, and some shadows of the jacket on the outside. It's very minimal, but it works. And again, the shapes look nice. You do have to see it from afar. If you zoom in, you will appreciate the line work and everything. But zooming out, it's so clear because the lines are fairly thin. Sometimes it feels like there is no line work, but there is, obviously. The shapes are very strong. Going back. Oh, I like this one. Let me just have some coffee. Okay, halftone textures, minimal black shadows. Reminds me of another chick, or another artist named cravat. Is that the name, cravat something? They do like using this black something. That it has that graphic manga comic vibe. But in this case, oh shit, there are way more straight edges here. It's a bit more jaggedy, more sharp. Maybe it's because it's supposed to contrast, say, the face. If you look at the face, the hair, and even this sort of hair tie, it's way more. There's hardly any like sharp lines or straight edges. So maybe you needed to balance that out with a strong set of legs. Even the belly here, there's a slight. That's only a slight sort of curve. The chest is like super like jaggedy, right? Lots of almost basic shapes being used here. And if you look at the folds, it's very minimal. They only add what's enough. So I think what we can take away here is that you can be a bit more choosy with the lines you choose. Like, you don't have to overdo it. And at the same time, you can just sort of suggest something without even rendering it or painting it or adding shadow, right? For example, here you can definitely tell these two are under, like, it's in shadow, but there's no like black thing there. Although because the value is slightly darker and there's a line separating it, like, you can sort of suggest or infer that it is in shadow, right? And I'm not really doing much line work in my own stuff, but I do want to. Although I'm not sure about the bleeds, but at the same time, without those bleeds and without those spacing in between, it will look less natural, I think. I think because of that, for example, in this one, you'll actually see it overshoot on the arm or through the arm, right? And I think that's what makes it more natural looking. Despite everything being like flat colors only, half-tone textures, nothing in this is painterly, like you don't see brush strokes, but because of the line work, it has that sketchy raw vibe, which I like. And again, for example, the anatomy, I think prioritize the shape instead of like the structure, which is something I've been learning when it comes to these sorts of illustrations. You don't have to be so accurate. You can actually push things that are, or bend. You may have to bend or even break some rules to be able to make something like this work. Because if you only stick to structure and structure alone, if you keep focusing on those logical sort of ideas to sort of validate and base your art off of, like, it's just not going to be as effective. I think by focusing or using shapes or this kind of technique where you exaggerate the shapes and everything and maybe bend some rules, I think more of the feeling can come out. More of the idea, I think, can come out. Now, even though with these sorts of illustrations, the story is not, it's not like a deep piece or like a super complex sort of idea. It's like pop art, very eye-catching, but you get the vibe clearly, like there's no question. And I think that's the cool thing about this, is that you don't really have to think about what's going on. It's very direct, but it's not so direct that it feels bland, right? Because sometimes when you're too like honest or straight to the point, like, it feels kind of boring, right? So you do need to add a bit of chaos, and maybe the diversity of using like halftones, of using like flat colors, different flat colors, having a bit of the graphic design sort of vibe, like knowing where to put the darkest values and lightest values, like learning how to problem solve that sort of thing and space things out appropriately. I think that can make a simple idea more poppy, right? Look at the hands. Again, minimal lines, imperfect lines, but it works. So if you're interested in this sort of thing, I do recommend you check out the work of matumot. here on X. If you're into the graphic design vibe, minimalistic sort of artwork styles, this artist is definitely for you. I would try and do a sort of a quick study. I'm not sure if I'll do it in a different video, or maybe I'll try and attach it to this art review. I think it's a good way. You know, some people have suggested it in the comments, but I do think it's a good way to sort of internalize what I've just seen by creating a sketch, doing a sketch, a quick sort of piece, a study. I think I can even more so like swallow that the information I've just gained from this whole art review thing. So that's it for this art review. So we'll see what happens next. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Bye.